thanks for your patience. I know we rushed you, but a lot of important stuff to be talking about. And we have a powerful presentation, I know, lined up with two folks who are personal friends of mine and amazing organizers who have share the mission that we all do, and each do it in a complementary way. One, we have Miriam Wise, right here, raise your hand, Miriam, with Adventure Crew. I happen to be on the board, a couple of us on the board of the High River Way are as well, an amazing organization she can describe, but they know how to get young people, teens, especially those who are disadvantaged, out into nature, to paddle, fish, hike, swim, camp, do all kinds of wild and crazy stuff. And then my buddy Tanner, yes, who was, by the way, on the board of the Ohio Riverway. He's wild and crazy. But Tanner is a rock star. He runs one of the most nationally recognized youth engagement and employment and training programs in the country, especially for disadvantaged youth, to help them develop career opportunities, skills, doing all kinds of stuff, not only themselves getting outdoors, but improving the quality of the natural environment. Some of you have hired his nonprofit organization to do work, but he is one of the top entities, is Groundwork, Ohio River Valley, and the entire country getting this work done. So they'll describe it and help us figure out how we can better make sure that everybody is engaged in the work that we do, which is so critical. So, Tanner and Miriam, take it on.
Thank you, Brewster. Oh, sorry, everybody. Brewster says friends. I like to say one of Brewster's many disciples. You might be his volunteer friends, his forced friends, whatever it is. I started as an intern. Yes, thank you. That was many years ago. So anyway, it's nice to be here with so many familiar faces. Many of you we partner with or have worked with. So forgive me if you've heard some of this, but I think some will be new. And of course, joined by my good friend and partner, Miriam, in which our two organizations work pretty closely together. And I'm going to start it off with Groundwork Ohio River Valley. Next slide, please. We'll go right into it. I know Andrea Ireland. Is this working?
Yeah.
I know Andrea Ireland is here from the National Park Service. She helped us start our Groundwork chapter here in Cincinnati, which is now called Groundwork Ohio River Valley. We were born out of the US EPA and the National Park Service. It's kind of an urban extension of what they do. Around the year 2000, they recognized they were lacking in racial diversity, other demographics, especially in cities and connecting with people around the country to their work. So they set up all of these cities across the country. Now there are 20, of which one we are in Cincinnati as Groundwork Ohio River Valley. Next slide, please. So at Groundwork, we like to say we're where justice and the environment meet. And in short of a whole 2-hour lecture here about justice, you've probably heard environmental justice is quite a trendy term here. And quickly, by show of hands, are we familiar with the Justice 40 initiative? Somewhat, yeah, great. We're going to get into that a little bit as a potential tool and opportunity for you, depending on your position and what you do with government or other nonprofits or other agencies. Justice 40 is a presidential, what's it called? Thank you, Dan. An executive order from POTUS, wherein when we look at ARPA and the Inflation Reduction Act and all these things, 40% of all that funding, which is generational funding, right? That we want to keep as much here in the Ohio River Valley as possible. 40% of all of that money has to be used on underserved populations. Underserved is kind of yet to be defined. So we're trying to lead the way in what that means. It could be our Appalachian communities, it could be our inner city communities, it could be our rural communities. Largely for Groundwork, where we work, is low-income communities of color in urban settings, but the definition is broad, so I think it can apply to you and your efforts, especially as you partner with other municipalities or agencies across the region. So justice and environment, it's a very different way of looking about environmental work and how it's been done traditionally. Really focus on engaging those who have been left behind by the environmental movement. And as we're all here today, we're trying to form a new movement. We're trying to do things different. And part of what Miriam and I are here to do is kind of stress you and stretch your minds and how you think about how you engage versus do outreach with communities, how you bring new people into the fold for all of these economic or recreational or whatever opportunities, right? Not just racial, but all sorts of diversity with ethnicity, genders, orientations, etc. So all of that is true, and we like to call ourselves the new conservation. Here's a really cool picture of one of our joint projects with the Cincinnati Zoo in Avondale, if you're familiar. Next slide. So basically, if you hear me say like one or two things today, trust, vulnerability, you might have really great ground game when it comes to engagement. You might still be waffling on, oh, how do I engage with X group or these people or that neighborhood? I think the first step is just to get outside of your comfort zone and be vulnerable. That always kind of gets your foot pointed in the right direction, gets you into the door, and you can start working with potentially communities that you haven't worked with yet. And I make a fool of myself all the time. That's part of doing it. And building that trust, it takes a long time. There's no secret to community engagement. It takes repeated, lasting effort. That's why it's so hard to do, and a lot of people can't do it so well because it's hard and it takes a long time. But that's the bedrock of everything that we do, and part of what I think will be so important for your potential efforts as it relates, again, to federal funding, Justice for You. Next slide, please. I won't read all this, but as you get into engagement, this is our blurb. Lots of organizations have their own thing. What are your terms of engagement? How do you say, okay, my organization or this collective or whatever would like to diversify in X, Y, and Z ways? Do we just go into a new space and say, hey, we're here, this is how we do it? Probably not the best approach, right? Intentionality, again, vulnerability. For us, it's the trust, the inclusion, the results. Often we bring resources to the table. We're trying to work with a new community, already have money in hand to get projects moving, to have their voice actualized through the funding or whatever that we're doing. And this is something that we call climate safe neighborhoods, which I'll get into right now, I believe. Next slide. Sweet. So again, this will not be a lecture on justice or equity, environmental justice. I'm far less concerned with the trendy topics and the buzzwords as I am the real action. And for us, when we boil it down, often it's income and opportunity. And when you think about environmental justice, however, as a practitioner, I think the sweet spot today with these words is the meeting point between data and lived experience. So you live in a neighborhood where there's a fuel refinery and a landfill and a chemical processing plant. You know what's going on, right? You live it every day. You can tell the story. Do you have the data to back it up? The US EPA has long had something called EJ Screen. You might be familiar if you're a planner or a government worker. They now have a new Justice 40 tool I encourage you to check out. It's kind of geared toward, again, getting all of these federal dollars by supporting the data. But what we're often lacking as practitioners or planners is the lived experience. So the climate safe neighborhoods work that we're doing, next slide, is combining all these things. And this is Cincinnati. There's a link there I won't go into because I'm worried about technical difficulties. You can explore all this. We have a huge web layout with all of these different layers of, say, toxins and demographics. We have the 1907 Kessler plan for Cincinnati. I haven't told Mayor Meyer yet, but we have a new grant from the EPA to do this on the Covington side of the river that just came through because the federal government is hemorrhaging money and they're retroactively awarding grants from like 2 years ago. So Mayor Meyer, if you're out here, we just got that like last week. So we'll be talking soon. Anyway, our communities look the way they do, not on accident, but on purpose, right? If you've heard of redlining, land use zoning, a lot of these practices and environmental injustices were put in places primarily low-income Black and brown communities because those others didn't have as much of a voice as some richer neighborhoods, and this is the reality that we face today. So with climate change, all of these things are going to be worse, of course, right? Air pollution, stormwater, asthma, other byproducts from transportation, and we have all of these environmental metrics, right? So you can see here on your left, this is surface temperature in Cincinnati. And then on your right is tree canopy, and you can see it's the inverse, places that have more impervious surfaces and more cement or hotter, et cetera. But what are the reciprocal issues there? What, again, is it asthma? Is it green space? So if you go to the next slide, please, we never stop there. We pair this with kind of the socioeconomic and demographic, racial demographic outcomes going on the ground. We've produced this metric called the Heat Vulnerability Index. There's all these dots all around here. I won't get into this so much on Cincinnati because this is the same thing that plays out in every city in the nation, right? Especially kind of the post-industrial or the Atlantic seaboard, where in kind of the smallest dots here and the most red, they suffer from the most heat, the most pollution, and they have the least amount of income to deal with that. So that's great. We have all this data, right? But now we're arming our citizens with not only the frontline experience, their lived experience, but this data. And next slide, please. We're producing these climate safe neighborhood reports, starting in Cincinnati, but spreading throughout the region. And these reports are being used as the basis for Justice 40 grant applications showing that, hey, residents know what's going on in their neighborhoods. They're being bolstered by the science. Not only are they collecting it, but our youth employees are working with NASA, believe it or not, to ground truth some of these surface temperature things and getting credentials in that way. But they're getting paid to do all this. So respecting their time, their life experience, and then making the linkages between racist housing policy, between redlining, land use zoning, all of this, as you well know, is going on up and down the river. We've never teased it out like this. And it kind of gets rid of the arguments and the gray area. You can point to a map from 1920s zoning plan, redlining plan, and say, this is the reason this factory is here, or whatever it may be. And it's pretty black and white. So climate safe neighborhoods, next slide, please, really puts power into the residents' hand and is a way that we use to do outreach and education, not only for and with our residents, but for our elected officials. So these workshops are happening across the tri-state in what we call climate safe life workshops, where it's one-off, where we map your neighborhood, we look at resident priorities. And then the best part in this kind of three-pronged stool, which is policy, citizen science, next slide is the action. And this is where we really want to talk to you about the youth green workforce. This is the largest in the country. They work from Portsmouth to Southern Indiana, thanks to Jack Sutton over there with Oak Heritage. They run businesses out of the nonprofit, and they also work with all sorts of municipal government, like with Becky here in Great Parks, and city government, and county government to better public land. Obviously, they're the owners of this public land and the National Park Service, but they often have no connection, no idea. So we talk about environmental justice communities. We talk about the relationship with nature. When you close your eyes and you think about that peaceful place for you and you think about what nature means to you, it might not be this awesome scene we see back here. It might be one of a public health hazard. It might be one of fear because of the historical issues like slavery. It might be one of this is a place I'm afraid to go and afraid to be. Flipping that narrative into an income generation opportunity of not only do you own this land literally as a citizen, but you're working on it, and bettering the land puts money into your pockets. It doesn't matter if we created an army of environmental scientists. That's not the point. We're trying to create a new generation that are stewards and that care about this stuff, so that when we put boat ramps into these communities, they know how to use it, right? This program employs 150 youth per year around about. They map and capture all of their work product via GIS, so they're learning all these skill sets, and they get different green infrastructure and energy efficiency certifications. And it was modeled after the National Park Service's CCC. So it's a cool legacy there, and it's blown up, and this region has the largest one in the nation now, but all those other 20 cities have that as well. Next slide. And you can see if you were to go on our website, there's a dashboard. You can pan across starting Portsmouth and go down into Indiana and so forth and see what they do. There's a youth and young adult version of this program. And the young adults are really kind of like a professionalized urban conservation corps, running a business, competing against other companies. Good picture. More good picture. Another big part, not to get too meta here, is the idea of restoration, right? And again, when we're talking about our riverfront or communities or whatever it might be, restoration, of course, for the land, digging a little deeper, brownfields, that really connects you again to a lot of our neighborhoods that have had unfair, disproportionate burden of environmental justice, dumping of landfills, of pollution, whatever it might be. So brownfield restoration, again, a lot of money tied to that potentially for the communities. But getting people involved with the land, it gets to a whole kind of metaphysical, spiritual place when your hands are in the dirt in your community. Again, you're making money and restoring, like this vacant lot we just did this summer. Next slide. And then tying in, there's all sorts of funding avenues here for you. If you have a stormwater problem right in your community, you also maybe have a YMCA or a youth group or a work program. You can start with a small grant and say, we're going to make this big rain garden. Doesn't take a lot of tech help, some landscape architecture, sure, some plants, etc. But this is done in partnership with our Cincinnati Public School District, and they created the largest rain garden on a Cincinnati Public School campus with students out there getting education as well, and with the green workforce leading the way. So we're building kind of those generational opportunities. Just some really cute stuff. Yeah. Start to cry here in a second. Not only is it all warm and fuzzy, right? Here's the output. It's making a huge dent in our region, and this is kind of Southwest Ohio, Southeast Indiana, Northern Kentucky. Bunches of invasives removed. They're kind of like a young, angsty, teen, badass crew of invasive killers that want to put that to use, right? All these bad species, a lot of trash, trees planted. And then what I'm most proud of too, of our budget of $2 million-ish, about a fourth of that goes straight into resident and youth pockets. So we're just a medium for kind of that economic infusion. So all of that adds up in some really great numbers. Excellent. And there's that. Next slide, please. Some things for you to think about when you're, if you know a community-based organization in your city, your neighborhood, whatever. These are some technical assistance things you can help with. Again, there's a lot of technical assistance money going on right now, especially in the US EPA, especially in the Environmental Justice Office, but also not limited to them. Think of HUD, think of DOJ, like whatever it might be. These are things that your community-based organization might need some help with, and that you can come to the table and match kind of strength for strength with them. Engagement versus outreach, right? We want the authenticity. Come correct, come vulnerable if you haven't been in that space. And I'm not going to lecture you about where you live, you know better than me. Blending their priorities with the opportunity that you might have. That's the big deal. Too much when we come into your community and say, you suffer from stormwater, you need this, you need that. Get to know what's important to them and then try to blend those opportunities that you might not have. And then again, I stress the Justice 40 initiative. I don't want to tell anybody about it because I want that like $600 billion for myself, but I think there might be enough for you as well to have some of it. So, keep on top of that. There's my stuff. I'm going to hand it to Miriam. Hopefully I've not gone too far.
No, you've gone too long, but it doesn't matter.
There we go.
Hello, my name is Miriam Wise. I'm the Director of Support and Engagement for Adventure Crew. And I want to tell you a little bit about our program as an example of a small local dream of a retired teacher that has grown into a large, impactful nonprofit for Cincinnati and North Kentucky teams that could be replicated or customized for your community to help engage folks with the natural resources in your towns and cities. So quick, little information about Adventure Crew. Our mission is to connect city teams to nature and each other. Like I said, we were born from the dream of a retired Cincinnati public school teacher. He had the opportunity to take his 11th and 12th graders out canoeing at the end of each year. It cost $25 to rent a canoe. So students who couldn't afford that couldn't experience the Little Miami River. And we saw how transformative it was for kids to get out on the water, learn a new skill. Many of them had a fear of the river and had never been in a boat. And he wanted to bring that experience to every city teen, recognizing that kids that live in built environments often have the least amount of access or awareness of the natural resources around them. But as Tanner mentioned, they own these public spaces, they're responsible for them. And we wanted to grow the next generation of environmental stewards through recreation. So from 2012-13 in our initial pilot year till now, we've grown from 3 schools to 26. We're serving 7th through 12th graders. So in Cincinnati Public, that's any high school, plus any of the elementary schools that also have 7th and 8th graders. And then in Northern Kentucky, we are in 6 schools there. And I think occasionally we pick up a 6th grader in some of those smaller communities. This averages out to about 300 to 400 kids going out a month and experiencing the mental and physical benefits of time spent outside. Here we are at Camp Ernst zip lining. There's 3 photos after each slide, so you can just click me through. Look at these faces. Take that, Tanner. How we work. Our program is free and frequent. This is really important to us. It is, as important as our mission that no child ever pays to participate in Adventure Crew. It is from, our founding that importance of the financial barrier being removed. And we know that as soon as there is even just a $5 fee, some kids will not be able to engage. So Adventure Crew is always free to students. They just have to make it to the bus. So we're providing the transportation to the venue. We're covering the activity costs. Do you need to rent a bike? Do you need to rent a boat? Do you need climbing gear? And we're making sure they're fed, which is really important. Many of our students come from households that are food insecure. So I think understanding your communities and the hierarchy of needs is really important. Like Tanner said, you can have a great program, but if students need to go and work to raise money for their household, or if they're going to be too hungry to come out and spend time with you, you're going to have trouble with engagement. We run adventures monthly, September through May. and that is 1 month for each of our crews, each school-based club. Our staff is out every single Saturday, and then the adventures rotate. So we go kayaking, mountain biking, zip lining, skiing and snowboarding, fishing, camping, name it. In the outdoors, we're there, and we're trying to get the students exposure to local city-based parks, places they can get to on a bus line, recognizing that they won't always have us, and we want them to build a lifestyle of going outside, so we can't be the only way they get to these spaces, but also bringing them to places that are a little further outside of the city, like the Little Miami River, that has such a rich history of conservation, that is a gem of our region in terms of conservation, and students just don't know it's there because they can't take a bus to Loveland or further north to experience the river. So we're going each month. Kids are getting to see a different activity. There's no expectation that every child come to every adventure. Again, we're focused on the long-term goals. It's less about getting a kid to commit to coming every single month, and more about them recognizing the things that they love and enjoy and will do in adulthood. So if they don't like hiking, that is okay. If they struggle with skiing and snowboarding, some adults also do not enjoy those activities. But if they want to be there every weekend, they are welcome to for each month. And they select and learn and go deeper based on their personal interests. Next slide, please. Here we are, Perfect North, just up the street. This adventure in particular is really important. Like Groundwork Adventure Cruise serves many Black and Brown students and lots of students who are at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, and they don't know how to be in some of these spaces sometimes. If you've never been skiing and snowboarding, it can be confusing. Like I get the boots, which boots do I get? And then they put me in these skis. Do I pop right into them right there? And then I'm trying to shuffle out. And I can say I understand that as someone who's skied and snowboarded for the first time as an employee of Adventure Crew. And I learned side by side with our teams and realized how in some environments you can feel unwelcome at times or uncertain. So going as a posse, as a crew, with your peers and kids from across the city, our kids are kind of tackling some of these things in a comfortable environment. They're more likely to engage as adults. When they get invited to a business ski trip, they have an idea of what goes on. So I like this adventure in particular. It is our most expensive, and that's a lot of my job, right? Is fundraising to ensure that every student has access to an activity like skiing, so that we continue to diversify these spaces and grow the competitive and recreational side. I hear a lot about the Olympic skier from this region. Who's to say that that student couldn't go to Woodward High School in 10 years? There is a lot of talent that is distributed through the city, but if you don't have access, we could be missing that. So I want to talk about engaging city teams specifically. This is where we operate and what we do. It may or may not be relevant to your work, but I think the process of understanding your population will carry over. We really love working with teens because they're curious and they're independent minded. They can be given a lot of leeway. They've been given a lot of responsibility. We talk about safety, but we really let them lead the adventure. If you are curious about what's under that rock, if you want to walk over that log, if you want to try paddling your canoe or your kayak this way, we want them to engage that part of their mind, start testing things, and it's hard to do that with a third grader. So our program, 7th through 12th graders, really allows us to use unstructured play, and we give them a lot of freedom. Again, we keep in mind the historical and systematic lack of access, students that live in the city, but it may also be true for more rural environments. There's not a means to get to some of these resources easily. So we hear that from some of our rural partners, that students, even in less densely populated areas, maybe can't even hop on a bus, right? So realizing how the lack of access impacts your population. And then for our students, the fear of the outdoors, which Tanner mentioned, sometimes kids don't want to go outside. Instead of being like, this is what we do and it's good for you, you should be outside more, really taking a step back and understanding the historical context, that those fears are valid, right? Maybe you only have one pair of shoes. So if you get them really muddy and dirty when you go kayaking, you are going to be in trouble. You have historical generational fears of being outside. The idea that I love bees as an example, we're trying to save the honey bees, there's a really strong emphasis on that. And then we have our city kids that are like, bees are scary and I want to smash them because we have not done the work of bridging the gap there. And it's not their fault for having that fear. It's our job to make that information more accessible and to hear them about why to be afraid of being stung by a bee and working, through that process step by step. I'll also say that city kids and teenagers in general are awesome to work with because we help them inform their post-secondary plans. So our kids are experiencing different types of recreation. They're also getting exposed to jobs that they don't know exist. So I think I saw, well, I'm not sure now. I always use Chris Manning with Human Nature as my example when I talk about this. Many of our kids don't know that landscape architecture is a job. But when they are with us and we're in parks, we can talk about who maintains the trails, who works in HR for great parks. That's a job too. There's ways to be in green infrastructure and green jobs, green careers in many different ways. You can work with Tanner in the summer and get dirty and rip up some honeysuckle, but there's also someone who runs the tech department, does accounting for ODNR. So getting their world to broaden just a little in context of green, recreation, conservation careers, so that they can inform their next steps, whether that's going straight into the workforce or that's entering college with the intention to study environmental science or to become an environmental engineer. We can help infuse ideas, and it's all based on exposure. Kids often want to be doctors and police officers and firefighters because that's what they see. So this allows them to see that people can own a livery like Nikki. That's a job. And if you've never been in a kayak, how would you know that you can run your own small business and have a livery? Here we are at Valley View in Milford. And hot dogs. I want to talk just for a second about crew pathways. So I've described kind of the green crew of our work. Kids coming out on a Saturday, they're with their peers, they're combining with kids from across the city, they're getting to know new people, they're visiting new places, they're having fun, right? And I believe that our work is done when children are outside and they are having fun. They deserve that. A lot of them have their childhood kind of washed away prematurely with responsibilities in their household. If they can go outside and ride a bike and be a kid, that is enough. But for those who want to go deeper, I want to know about working for the Coast Guard. What happens at a biology field station? Tell me more about fish. What's a riparian zone? We have built crew pathways as a way to allow students to get deeper exposure to these careers and these worlds. So essentially kids move from the green crew up the pathway based on how they want to engage with more activities. It's self-selecting, but they also get recommendations. And as they move up the tiers, they're going to get into more education and conservation focused activities. There are a few partners in the room that have been with us for a long time and might remember we used to do an activity called Lunch and Learn. It was a great concept that when we were on a Saturday with 100 kids, we'd break halfway through the kayak, paddle, or the hike, and we talk about being a naturalist. Problem is, it's really hard to focus 100 kids on being a naturalist, on anything really. And so if we want to have opportunities for kids that are really interested in going to the biology field station and electrofishing or getting into the macroinvertebrates and studying those, we needed to create a way to do smaller group initiatives. And the pathway allows for kids to select into those, and then for us to bring in more partners to do small group work. So that starts around the Gold Crew, where kids are getting more of that education, more of that conservation. And then our core crew are really our leaders. Those are our top kids, and they have the opportunity to not only do more advanced recreation, but also education and conservation opportunities. And I'll show you 2 examples. So this is our spring break swim training program. It's considered a blue crew, not because of the water, but because it's an additional recreation opportunity. But this was born out of a real tragic reality in the city is that most kids don't know how to swim. Many kids don't know how to swim. And we had students drowning in the city because they would get hot, they would wade into a local creek maybe, or they would be near a neighborhood pool or could sneak into someone's backyard, and they didn't know enough about water safety, and we were losing children to drowning. We also do a lot of activities on the water, and our kids are very observant. They're awesome. You say wear a life vest, they clip that sucker on and they don't take it off, right? we don't want that to come out of fear. We want it to come out of respect for the river and safety. So our spring break swim training program is an opportunity for kids at any level to join us while they're out of school during spring break, likely not doing anything but sitting inside, to come and get high quality certified swimming instruction. So if that's learning to put your head under the water for the first time, or getting to the point where you can maybe try out for a swim team and become a lifeguard, we meet them where they are. Again, everything is provided for these students: goggles, suits, towels. We want to make sure there's no barriers. And then after a week, if there are students who are of age and able to become lifeguards, again, funneling into a career, one that the city desperately needs. I don't know about your communities, but we didn't open all of our pools this year because we don't have enough lifeguards to work the pools, and the kids don't get exposure to pools because they're not open in their communities, right? So we've got a cycle going. So students who are able to be certified as lifeguards, we make sure that those fees are covered so that they can engage with that opportunity. Here we are in the Little Miami River, studying macroinvertebrates. So this is a part of our gold crew. We were with Little Miami Conservancy, learning about what's in the river, what makes the river healthy, what are those signs. And again, Adventure Crew has the teams. We want the partners. So you may be in your community on the other side of this coin. You might be the partner and you're looking for the kids. So Tanner mentioned a YMCA. Maybe you go to your school district and find that population, if it's adults, if it's young professionals, if it's families, and you know, work towards them. Say this is our skill set. This is what we want to help, you know, bring to the community. How can we engage to know them best? So we are really fortunate to have partners like Groundwork, like LMC, Campaign and Education Foundation, which is on the next slide. They bring their expertise. We bring our students, and it allows us to do more than we can do on our own. And I think that is a big lesson in humility that we have learned. I'm never going to have a vast enough knowledge to personally guide all of our students through all of these different experiences. But if we, you know, grow strong partnerships, we can provide so much more to our teams. And here we have two kids that are up in the lakes of Canada near the Boundary Waters with Campaign and Education Foundation. This is our core crew. And they make it to this level to participate in a multi-day, overnight, remote paddling experience because they've moved through the pathway. So they've had opportunities to do overnight trips, to test the boundaries of not having their phone for days, and doing some of that conservation and education work. And now I'm going to step back and talk a little bit about broadening the audience. I've talked really specifically about what we do, our kids who are in the city, but a lot of our work involves engaging a broader community, both for financial support, but also because folks love what we do and are often asking how they can join. And I have to say, you can't because you're not 7th through 12th grade, but there's an eagerness and an appetite for people to be outside. So talk about 3 of our programs that are community-based. We put on the Ohio River Paddle Fest every year. This is our largest annual fundraiser. So it is connecting the general public to the river, to the communities along the river, for us, Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. It is generating funds then for kids to get on the water for the first time. And it's connecting us to an audience of people, a community that cares about the same things that we care about, or starting to learn and dip their own toe as adults into recreation. While I would not suggest you come for Paddle Fest and try to replicate this. I'm just kidding, but don't do anything the first weekend on this hours. This is a great example of how you can start something community-based, connect to the natural resource, and bring in and grow an event. It doesn't have to become 2,000 people, but something that's beloved and appreciated. And I can tell you every year we have folks that express to us that their perspective on the river has changed because they've been on it. They feel differently, and it can do a lot to advance just the reputation of some of our maybe misinterpreted natural resources. So we have to credit Brewster for this. This is his creation. And I'll give 2 more examples. Great Ohio River Swim. We do 200 people coming across the river and back. And this now funds that spring break swim training program. So they work in cycle. People swim themselves and then they know that they're bringing that to other students. And finally, at the end of the tables is our outdoor guide. And I think this might be one of the most easily replicable, useful tools for everyone in the room. We created this as a resource for the community to get outside and explore green space. You could have a similar community publication to just let people know what's out there. People are moving to your town, get in every hand of every realtor so that when folks move, they know where to go and what to do. Doesn't mean we're not opposed to putting you in our outdoor guide. We do this every 2 years. This year we printed 10,000 copies. And the whole goal was to get people connected to the outdoors, have a resource that was free to them, and they could pick up and dive deeper so that we are, again, engaging folks that are maybe wandering, touring outside of who we expect to see or know how to go outside. So if you have any questions about that, or if you want copies, we are happy to bring them to you.
It's online too.
It is online. Thank you, Brewster. Did we talk through our question time? Oh, we really would hear it. Sorry. We were supposed to have questions, but I don't think we're going to.
Well, we have time. One question, and then we have opportunities for you all to touch base with those guys, but David is saying no.
No.
He's saying no. He's a hard guy.
You can email us.
So
Apologies.
we have information about how to contact these guys, I think in the pamphlet. If not, just Google Groundwork, Greater Cincinnati, Ohio River Valley, and of course Adventure Crew. And we thank you, folks.
Thank you, Rick.
Anybody, big round of applause.